And Dick had a job. He sold oh,
Auto parts.
what
Ended
is,
up auto parts
yeah, auto parts. Sold auto parts. He had a
in Oxnard.
hmm and unfortunately he had a nervous breakdown and took his own life, which was a big shock. But Alice remarried, and we visited her and her new husband too at one time. And she later died too. She had died of cancer a few years ago.
Now, all the Dick's kids have initials of JD, right?
Yeah, well, Jay.
J? Oh, okay.
Um, what was it for?
Jan.
Jan was the oldest girl,
Mm-hmm.
and his boy was named Jay, and this initial D after Dad, because everybody
Didn't
called Dad JD.
Didn't have a middle name. He just
He
had
didn't
a
have
middle
him,
initial.
no, just an initial. And then the youngest girl was, what's her name?
Jerry.
Jerry. I don't keep in touch with them, but I think Anita, Marcy's daughter, still keeps in touch with them. So it's been a long time since any of us have seen them. So that takes care of Dick's family, and then let's see, here we got Marcy's wedding picture.
Last time I checked, Jay was still in California someplace. Like somewhere like
San Luis Obispo.
Yeah, San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
you gotta go
Marcy.
to your left. There you go.
Marcy married Fred Litkenhouse. And on this picture is Loretta's on the far left, and then Mary Mulry, Fred's sister, and Marcy and Fred, and then Lucky Everett Litkenhouse, Fred's brother, and Elroy Meyer, a good friend of Fred's. And little ring bearer and flower girl were our Tommy and Connie. They were a month from being 3 years old when they were in this wedding. And of course they stole the show. They were cute. I had preached to Tommy and Connie about walking slowly up the aisle. When they practiced, I told them to be sure and walk slowly. So the morning of the wedding, they started up the aisle. I started them from the back of church, and Tom was up in front. They were supposed to walk up to their dad. And first thing you know, Connie came running back. Mommy, Tommy's walking too fast. So, of course, Tommy came back too, and I had to start him a second time. But that time they did all right. They got all the way up to the front, and they did all right. But they were young. And Marcy and Fred worked for his brother, cutting meat. Marcy worked there later too, but I believe early in their marriage, they lived here in O'Fallon, and Fred had a service station on the corner of Main and Pittman.
Where
And
where
this-
Huck's is right now?
Yeah, it was on the other side of the street. Building's been torn down. And Fred Jr. was born here in O'Fallon. But by the time Anita came along, they were living in St. Charles. They had a real nice house on Cherry Street in St. Charles. And Peggy, I think, yeah, they were still living there when Peggy was born too. Peggy and Jack are about the same age. In fact, when I was expecting Jack, Marcy said, well, you can use my baby bed and you can use all this stuff that I've got. And a few weeks later she came along and said, I'm an Indian giver, I gotta have it back. So they were, I think, about 5 weeks apart, I think.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
I'm into May and she's beginning of July.
Yep. So, Fred was one of the nicest guys you want to know, but he had one big problem: drinking. He learned that, I think, in the service. He was with General MacArthur in the Philippines, and he was a medic. He saw enough sights to drive him to drink. Picking up bodies with no arms and no legs and things like that. It was, he seldom talked about it. But I know it was traumatic. And, well, he just drank his life away, really. Couldn't hold a job because he was always drunk. And finally got so Marcy just couldn't put up with it either anymore, so they separated. And like I said, you couldn't have wanted a nicer guy. He was so good to her when he was sober. But he ended up with a stroke and in a nursing home. And died pretty young, really, in his 50s. Marcy went to work for the priests at the St. Cletus Parish in St. Charles. And she worked for, well, as long as she worked. She developed diabetes and she was in bad health for some time before she died. She had lost a leg and was in very poor health. She died 4 years ago.
She lived
in August, yeah.
She lived in what part of Florida?
Oh, yeah, when Father Browner he retired and moved to Port St. Lucie, Florida, she went with him. And she never did like Florida very well, but she didn't know what she'd do for a job if she didn't, because of her health and everything. So I would go down once a year and spend a couple of weeks with her. And she would get home a couple times a year too, so we saw her pretty often. And her daughter Peggy lived in Tampa, so that wasn't too far. Peggy has moved back to this area, but Anita lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and has lived there for a long, long time. Almost, I guess when she first married, they moved out there. And then Fred Jr. lives in St. Charles. He and his wife are divorced, or at least separated. I'm not sure if they have a divorce or not. And don't see him too often. He works for the hospital in St. Charles. He works as a guard. And I still keep in touch with his wife. But Marcy, when she was not able to get around, she lived with Joe and Nancy, my son Joe and Nancy, for a couple of years. They took care of her. She was in a wheelchair and needed quite a lot of care. And they were very good to her. And then, she ended up in a nursing home. She died at the nursing home up here in O'Fallon, but it got to be where she didn't know what was going on. But I really missed her. And let's see.
Peggy.
Huh?
You didn't talk about Peggy got married and lived in the other side of Florida on the other coast.
But I guess that Peggy lived in Tampa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About the same time when Marcy was living in Port St. Lucie.
Yeah. They were about 4 hours apart.
And she ended up back here too.
And Peggy is now in St. Charles. So that just about takes care of her family, I guess. Marcy's family.
Now that Elroy Meyer in there, is that Bernice Meyer's husband?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Owns the bowling alley. Yeah, I can see the resemblance
Yeah.
in the kids.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Well, I had a Meyer in my class.
They were buddies.
Yeah. Well, how about, can we talk about Dad's brothers and sisters
Yeah.
as much as you know?
Yeah, we
I know
don't.
There's a couple of pictures right here. That there's a picture of
Neva.
Neva. Pretty small.
Yeah. Neva and Jim's wedding picture.
Even Jim, I remember going over to their house quite a bit. when
Yeah,
I was
we
a
were
kid.
very.
Jim was a radio buff.
Yeah. Tom and Jim were both into the radios, electronics, and so we saw them a lot. They, in fact, when Joe was born, Jim and Neva took Tommy and Connie and kept them. Of course, in those days we stayed in the hospital for a week, so they had Tommy and Connie for a week.
No, Neva and Jim never had any children of their
No,
own. Right?
Neve and Jim couldn't have children. They took care of foster children for a while, and then they ended up adopting Judy. And we still keep in touch with Judy. Jim and Neve are both gone. They both died with cancer.
Yeah,
Jim had bone
Bone
cancer,
cancer,
yeah.
yeah.
Died by inches. Neva developed liver cancer of the liver, and she didn't make it very long. Grace, Tom's oldest sister.
Let's look at that picture. Is that Bob? Doesn't that look like Bob?
It is Bob.
Okay.
Bob and Ann and Mary Stewart. No, that's their daughter, Diane.
Well, let's talk about that
Yeah.
because we don't know that much about Bob's. Well, there's not a whole lot to say about Bob's family, I don't think.
Where are we?
Up, up, and to your left.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, that's Bob and his wife Ann and their oldest daughter Diane.
Yeah, looks like he's in the service there.